kind of audience there is at Davos, it must have kind of been a very binary speech for them. On the one hand, she's the leader of Brexit, which they hate. On the other hand, she's a huge supporter of globalization and world trade, which is under threat, and they love.
Well, I hope listening to her speech, they might be rethinking some of their cliched groupthink. That's the second great speech we've heard from Theresa May in 3 days. And I think if I was asked to contribute to what she was saying, I wouldn't have changed a word. I think she's absolutely bang on the money.
What are the chances of them rethinking, though? I mean, we've had, in some ways, some of the pressure has been upped. We've had HSBC talking about perhaps is the key word here, relocating 1,000 staff to Paris. UBS, there are 1,000 of its people could be moved to London. It's interesting, it's always 1,000. US Bank Goldman Sachs talking about 1,000 from London to Frankfurt. How seriously do you take these threats?
When I was working for a FTSE 100 fund manager in the late 1990s, 2000 period, when we decided not to join the euro, we heard exactly the same claims made. And actually, far from jobs being lost to London, since then London has consolidated its position as...
So you don't take this seriously?
Look, we heard a lot of these claims made in the run-up to the referendum. And it may be that there are some businesses who feel that they are better off moving to Paris or Frankfurt. But we heard all this 20 years ago when we decided not to join the euro. What will decide whether or not the city and the rest of the UK prospers is whether or not, having left the European Union, we make good on this vision of a liberal Brexit, opening ourselves up to the world and not just to the Eurozone. If we do that, we will prosper enormously.
And if you do that, do you think they stay?
I think so.
What about Toyota? It employs 3,000 people in Britain.
What we've got to be careful of is a lot of the sort of people employed as corporate lobbyists by these companies in the run-up to the referendum were dead against Brexit. They haven't quite got over it. But the actual business men and women, the people who actually make the decisions, I think will come to terms with the change, recognise actually liberal Brexit is good for their business, and I think we will start to see them changing their tune.
But it was the chairman of HSBC, Stuart Gulliver, not the corporate lobbyist, that said we will move in about 2 years' time when Brexit becomes effective.
It's in about 2 years now. Rather than immediately after.
So you're sceptical of these claims?
I am a little sceptical, but they know their business better than I do, and let's wait and see. But I suspect that in 10, 15 years' time, the City of London will be an even more of a global financial hub than it is today.
What do you make of this claim? The Maltese Prime Minister, I think he's part now of he's in the EU rotating presidency seat for the first 6 months of this year, and repeats this demand or idea that Britain would have to pay a 60 billion euro exit price. Well, I mean, it would seem to me, I don't know what that's based on, or whether it has any real basis. But whether it has any basis or not, I would suggest to you that no British Prime Minister could ever agree to that.
Of course, and it's a baseless claim. But what we need to avoid doing is getting involved in a war of words between some of the more excitable Eurocrats. There are clearly going to be...
He's a Prime Minister, he's not a Eurocrat.
He's the head of the rotating presidency or whatever. There are clearly going to be some vested interests in Brussels, people who are rather attached to their tax-free salaries and perks and bonuses and their empire of officialdom, who will deeply resent us from leaving. But we mustn't rise to the bait. We want to be good neighbours. And what really struck me about Theresa May's speech today and impressed me was how generous it was, making clear we want to be good neighbours after we've left. That wasn't just something we said during the referendum campaign. We really mean it. As an independent country outside the European Union, we want to cooperate, but as equal partners, not as supplicants.
It may not be 60 billion. Indeed, I think we can agree it's unlikely to be anywhere near 60 billion. But will there not be some price to pay as we exit?
Clearly, we want to leave on good terms, and we want to honour any commitments we have under international law, but we're not about to pick up a huge bill to help some of the anti-Brexiteers in the European system come to terms with their grief. We are going to leave in a couple of years' time, and we promise not to pursue a claim for our share of the Berlaymont building and all those other things that our money's funded in return for a good, fair, reasonable settlement. We want this to work for both sides. We don't want this to be a bitter divorce.
You've said twice in the past couple of minutes how much you like both of Mrs. May's speeches. So you are generally happy with the direction that she's going in now.
I'm absolutely delighted. I've been pushing all my adult life to have a government, a prime minister, committed to this agenda, and I really feel quite emotional about it, actually. I think it's wonderful.
It is likely, we're waiting on the Supreme Court, I think it's the 24th of January, it said.
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday it's going to rule. There is an assumption, we don't know, but we all, in the media and in politics, we seem to be operating on the assumption the Supreme Court will uphold the challenge. Are there any parliamentary dangers for the Article 50 process if we do have to do what the Supreme Court says and it has to go through the parliamentary procedure?
I don't think, if the court rules that it's exclusively for Parliament to make any decision, I don't see a danger, because in a worst case scenario, if you find a Parliament that resists the referendum, you simply call a new election and make sure you have a Parliament that agrees with the verdict of the people. I think the danger comes if the judges get it into their heads that it's someone other than Parliament that must make this decision. For example, if they give the Welsh Assembly or the Scottish Parliament or any other third party de facto veto powers, that I think would trigger a serious constitutional crisis. But if it's for Parliament to decide, even if the House of Lords decided to throw a wobbly, it's possible to call a general election and replace the House of Lords fairly straightforwardly.
So you think it's possible to that if the Lords do in some way try to block this or delay it or whatever, that could provoke an election too?
Well, I do, absolutely. If we could leave the European Union and make sure that those who make our laws in Parliament live under the law, that would be the icing on the cake, wouldn't it?
What about UKIP? Will Paul Nuttall be fighting the by-election in Stoke?
We're going to have a hustings tomorrow. We'll make the decision tomorrow, so I genuinely don't know. We're going to make the announcement on Saturday. Paul would be a superb candidate, but this isn't about UKIP, this is about Stoke. Stoke has had Labour MPs since 1950. It deserves something better than that.
Indeed. And would he be your choice of candidate?
I think it would be absolutely superb as a candidate, but we're a Democratic Party and I'm not registered as a UKIP member to vote in that hustings. So, I'll be supporting whoever, but Paul would be an absolutely superb candidate. He really would be a force for Stoke.
All right, we shall see.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.